Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to day 2 of the Power of Love Summit, transforming self and society through love and compassion. Since this is a summit about matters of the heart, before we get started, let's just take a moment to tune into our heart. Maybe you put your hands on your chest, maybe even skin to skin. Take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Closing your eyes if that feels good for you, and just feeling the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Tuning in to that unconditional love in your chest. This beautiful heart center. It's available to us at any time. Take another deep breath in. We'll pause and hold the breath at the top. And exhale. Coming back to this moment. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Brittany Tackett. I'm a mother. Of course, my phone is going to ring as soon as we start. I forgot to silence my phone. First and foremost, I'm a mother. I'm a transpersonal coach and therapist, yoga meditation teacher, and the founder of Heart First Education, whose mission is to educate the whole person, heart first. So I first started this organization because I was working as a mental health therapist in the schools, and I really saw the disparity in how we educate. And we focus so much on the mind and just not enough on the heart. And so I really wanted to start to bring more emotional intelligence into schools. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. The vision of Heart First is a world where hearts are educated as much as minds. And so that's the purpose of this summit, bringing together heart-centered leaders, teachers, coaches, healers from all different parts of the world to talk about these things, how we can live more from our heart, have more compassion. And today I have a very special guest, Jani Clark. She's a hypnotherapist and a writer. She has a background in mindfulness and social work. And she's here today to talk about a really important topic that's really near and dear to my heart, self-compassion as a superpower. Yeah. Totally agree with that statement. It definitely is. Thank you for being here, Jani. I would love for you to introduce yourself to us, tell us about you and your work.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be part of this. But as Brittany said, my name is Jani Clark, and I live here in Texas, right outside of Austin. I have a 5-year-old son, and I have a background in social work, so I get all of like psychology around the human mind, how it works, why we function the way that we do, especially living in our society, right? Like our environment becomes a lot of how we identify for ourselves and how we interact with our world and our relationships within ourselves. And self-compassion came along for my ride back in my master's social work program, during my internship. And it just was a life-changing opportunity to be part of the different programs that I created during that internship, and self-compassion just became my all and be all. It's been my foundation for everything ever since then. Being a mother, being a friend to myself, as an author, as a coach, as a hypnotherapist too, just creating that safe space when it comes to compassion. And yeah, I love exactly everything that I do, and it comes from that foundation of self-compassion and love.
Yes, I love that. So what does self-compassion mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you say it's a superpower?
Yes. Well, as I was introduced also as being an author, my second book is Becoming Your Own Best Friend. And to me, that's exactly what self-compassion is. It's becoming your own best friend, that we've all developed this inner critic power within us that takes over a lot until you recognize where it comes from. And as I say in that book, a lot of the time that inner critic has a lot to do with, like, it's someone else's voice a lot of the time, right? If we really quiet down and we listen to it, we can hear it maybe being a parent or a teacher or a sibling or an old classmate or something that really just became our identity. And self-compassion is the superpower of like my everything because it transforms everything, right? Just as we know, love is the highest form of energy, has the biggest healing potential, right? Self-compassion, it's right there at your fingertips, just like breathing is. And so we're able to, in that moment, just take a couple of seconds, just a couple of minutes, and just return back to, that loving awareness that we have with ourselves.
Yes,
Hmm.
definitely. And would you have any tips for people of how to
Hmm.
practice self-compassion, especially, in those times when it's hard, like those about the things about ourselves that we really struggle with, when we do make a mistake, or all those things that the inner critic is going to start talking about, right? Maybe
Yeah.
we have some things that have been going on for a long time, right? It's like worn out tapes. And so how
Yep.
do we rewrite, those
Yeah.
programming, and how do we find that compassion when
Hmm.
maybe the first instinct or the first thought that comes up maybe isn't so compassionate, right?
Yeah. And it's having to be aware of the moment, right? So there's three pillars of self-compassion. And the first one is the obvious of being mindful. You have to be mindful of what's happening, what's coming up to the surface, what thoughts are coming up based off of the situation. And so you really, in that moment, have to recognize, what am I feeling? Where is it in my body? What thoughts are associated with it? And even asking, like, where does this come from? Like, where did I hear this? Where was this created? And really finding that root cause. You don't have to go into every single piece of that detail in the moment, but it definitely helps as you recognize that this is a pattern. Like if it's something like, oh, I'm a terrible mom, or my boss hates me, or whatever it is, right? Like recognizing in that moment, or even that, even if you don't have time in that moment, making time later to be like, I'm going to observe this. I'm going to go into this and really find out what is happening. But you have to really look at all the senses with that, everything that you're experiencing, and identifying in that moment what's happening and where am I feeling it. And being really honest with yourself. It's really hard sometimes, right, to say that I'm feeling like a bad mom, or um, whatever, or I failed at this project at work and I should have done this, or I could have done this, or I was even in like, a car accident or something, right? Where like I just had someone recently tell me a story where she just wasn't paying attention in the moment and she totally ran into the person in front of her and she was beating herself up over it. But in that moment, what you could say is like, yeah, I am feeling this way. I am feeling really anxious because now this is going to cost a lot, or I am feeling like I'm alone in the situation. Just being honest with yourself about what you're feeling and what you're thinking about yourself. But the next part is one of my favorite parts about it. It's common humanity. So you then recognize, so the way that I describe this is like how, say you're feeling anxiety, right? You're feeling really anxious over whatever situation. The ocean itself is the emotion. And then we're each in separate little boats. And so like your anxiety is maybe totally different than my anxiety. Or even if it has something to do with being a mom, but you might be anxious over like having, a different age child than I do and what they're going through versus me. So like that's the two separate boats that we're experiencing, but the common humanity aspect of it is the emotion. And so how does that connect, right? Is the fact that we all have different experiences, but the core thing to remember is how other people also have felt this too. And sometimes, even in that moment, we can remember, oh, my mom used to feel this way. Or I remember my friend recently going through the same situation. Even if you can't find a specific person in your life who has gone through something similar or has felt that, we can just remember that as humans, like, emotions is what connect us. Like we all know what it feels like to be anxious or sad or angry or bitter or resentful or rejected or something along those lines, right? And so that's why I love like the second core piece, because we can kind of get stuck in the mindfulness. Like we can get stuck in feeling some sort of way. What I also like to remind people is that when you are looking at it from a different viewpoint, that helps a lot because you don't get yourself stuck in the I am anxious. You are able then to say, I'm experiencing this in the moment. And then you are able then to detach from the experience just enough to be able to see it from a different vantage point, a different perspective, right? So we have mindfulness, then we have common humanity, then you go into self-kindness. And this is where you take action. This is asking, what do I need in this moment? And I like to have like a long list of self-care activities to be able to choose from. Or even then I might think of something else, like if I'm feeling, bitter because my friend said something to me in that moment, I could feel into it, find common humanity. And then the self-kindness is saying, I need to talk to her. I need to open up to her. And it's like what she said or what she did didn't feel good, right? That could be that, what do I need in this moment? Or it could just be taking a walk or taking a breather or talking to yourself in the mirror, whatever it is, right? It could really just be anything. But that self kindness is the action part. That's where you find out or look for what it is that you need to do to take the next steps. Yeah, it's amazing work.
I love all that. And
Mhm.
I'm going to forget the exact title, but you said your book was about befriending yourself.
Mhm.
I love that because that's what I kind of will say to myself
Yeah.
when I'm experiencing the opposite of compassion and I need to bring it in.
Mhm.
Is what would I say to a
Yes,
friend if my friend was experiencing that?
exactly.
Try to treat
Mhm.
yourself how you would treat a friend. And that's such a shift because the way we talk to ourselves, we probably
Mhm.
would never talk to someone else that way. So
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why there's so many different myths when it comes to self-compassion. And Dr. Kristen Nuff is like the core person when it comes to self-compassion research. Her partner, also Chris Gerber, is also a great person to go into. But Kristen Nuff has a couple of books out now about self-compassion and a bunch of different research. And that's what she says, is that we can get kind of stuck in the um, mentality that like giving yourself self-compassion it makes you selfish or it makes you complacent or it makes you a narcissist or it makes you whatever these things. But the actual research and the science behind how self-compassion actually works as a superpower, it's beneficial when it comes to your overall well-being and the way that you talk to yourself. It can literally actually shut your inner critic up enough to be like that doesn't even exist anymore, and you're able then just to hear like, oh, I actually have this beautiful voice inside of me that says you're really doing a great job, like you do care about your children, and yeah, you've made a mistake but you can learn from it and that's okay because you're human. And we
yeah,
get lost as having to be perfect or having to be some sort of way, rather than just being able to say, okay, no, I'm doing the best that I can and I can keep doing better.
absolutely. I feel
Mhm.
like compassion is the one thing that we can have on our journey that is always able to kind of bring us back. Because,
Mhm.
say you've been working on healing or, reframing, changing something for a long time, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, like you're triggered again, or that old pattern comes back up, then there's that, like, you want to start to like beat yourself up again or go back into that, like, oh no, I messed up. And
Yep.
it's like you can have the compassion then of like, you know what? I'm trying. I'm trying. I've made this progress, and it's
Yep.
okay that I've had a setback.
Yep.
I'm human. I'm
Mhm.
gonna give myself some grace too.
Yes. Grace, absolutely. Yes,
Definitely.
sure.
And I feel like sometimes there's like a misconception around what compassion is. Like
Mhm.
I've kind of heard people maybe think of it as like pity, but that's
Mhm.
not really what it is.
I actually
Like
have the definitions of
that.
each of those. Like I always like have to refer back to it because they're kind of all interplay together. But
Yeah.
like compassion actually literally means to suffer together with. While pity, like I always give the visual of like it's to me, I can give pity to someone who I don't know very well.
Yeah.
And it's easier to be like, oh, like I'm really sorry that that's happening to you, but like it has nothing to do with me, so I can back off. Right. But as it's a really good friend who's experiencing it, like you can easily give someone you love and care and adore compassion because you feel it. And that's empathy too, right? Like empathy plays into part with that, where you can actually literally at times feel what someone else is feeling. But pity gets stuck in there because it does, like, even like, I think the definition of it says feeling sorrow slash compassion caused by suffering and misfortunes of others. So like even compassion is literally in the definition of pity, but pity itself has nothing really to do with compassion, because compassion is being able to feel into it. While like to me, like I like to phrase it as like empathy is like feeling into someone else's emotion and experience, as even like I identify because it makes, I've maybe experienced that too. But compassion is taking it that step further, that goes into like the self-kindness of the action step. While empathy, you kind of stop somewhere and you just feel it. And you can be in that sadness with your friend. But compassion takes it like, okay, friend, what do you need? What can I do to support you in this moment? Even if it's just being a shoulder to cry on, that's great too. But like, even it's taking that step of asking, what do I need or what do you need? That allows for like, you can have compassion even for people you don't know very much, but it has that, it has to have like that energy in the heart, right? That says like, okay, no, I need to take action here because someone's suffering. And I feel compelled to help out and be part of that healing or that solution.
Yes. Beautiful. Hmm. And I know that you refer to yourself as Mama Meta. I love that when I saw that as your logo on your
Mhm.
website. I immediately thought of meta loving kindness meditation.
Yes,
That's something that I
exactly.
practice myself and share with people I work with. I would love for you to share a little bit more about meta and how you found it, how it helps you, maybe for our viewers that have never practiced this
Yeah,
meditation before.
absolutely. It's my favorite too, loving kindness. And it's when you send love to yourself, right? Those phrases of may I experience happiness, may I feel a sense of peace, may I be safe from all forms of danger and harm, right? There's a traditional sense of meta, but then you can also kind of utilize your own affirmations and your own verbiage that really resonates with where you are, but you send it to yourself, then you go on to a loved one, then you go on to a neutral person, then it's a challenging individual, and then the whole world. And sometimes that challenged individual can be returned back to yourself, right? And that's where self-compassion comes into play, where I was like, hey, no, I've actually been kind of hard on myself. And so that challenging individual could be you, or it could literally be someone who is, you're in a fight with or having trouble forgiving or whatever it is. But that I just, the reason I'm a big fan of it is for many reasons, but a big part of it is when I was going through my divorce, I kept hearing all these stories from so many other divorced couples who were saying like, oh, good luck. Like that's going to be a horrible process. You have a child involved. Like it's going to be awful. Prepare yourself. And it was the same thing. Like I used it as when I got pregnant and labor and delivery, I had so many stories from different new moms who had kind of, unfortunately traumatic experiences giving birth. And I remember saying like, I mean, if it happens to be me, then I'll deal with it if that is. But I also had a thought back then of like, that's not going to be my story. Like, I remember thinking that's not mine. Like, it's their story. And I send them a lot of love and compassion for going through that. But like, I remember making a decision back then that's not my story. And the same thing, I was being challenged again with it when it came to my divorce. And I was like, that's not my story. What can I do to make sure this is an amicable situation? Because the circumstances of getting divorced were not, right? Like, there's always a reason why that's a process or happens to people. And I remember in that moment, I was like, what can I do? And meta and loving kindness came up, and it was just something that I did every single day. But I focused more primarily on myself and my ex during it. And I had to forgive him. I had to let go. I had to allow this to be energy of like forgiveness and love and the higher power of that. And I did that for every single day. And then we were just like, okay, let's do the paperwork. And it ended up being, almost like mind blowingly successful and easy to do. And that was my core foundation of like my, what do you call it? Like, that formed the biggest evidence in my life that this process works. that if you can do this and really send loving compassion to someone that you despise or you're so mad at or you are so hurt and betrayed by, if you have the power to do that, magic happens. And it was just so much evidence and clarity in my mind and my heart that I was like, okay, this this is my foundation for everything that I get to do. Like anyone who, is struggling with whatever sense of it, this is something that they can turn to, and it's super easy and it's powerful and it makes you feel so much better. And also being a mom, that's where mama, a part of like mama meta came into, but like being a mother to anyone who needs it, right? To anyone who's had a struggle with their own mother or the motherhood situation or sisterhood in general, like to be that motherly figure on top of the unconditional essence of love at its highest form. That's kind of where it was birthed. So,
Yeah, I
mhm,
love that. And I love the part about meditation of giving the compassion to someone who's difficult for you.
mhm,
I, I feel like that's a hard thing to do. But
yep,
when we can do that, like you said, the magic opens up. And I often say that every human
mhm,
is worthy of love and compassion. And a lot of people get triggered when I say that, and they have a hard
mhm,
time with that because they're like, well, these people have done such evil things, or look at Hitler and so on and so
yeah,
forth. I'm like, but these people are human. They were
yep,
suffering too. So like there's always that layer, and you
yeah,
can look at it from that
yep,
point of view. And you also mentioned, when you were practicing this for your ex-husband, about having to forgive him. And I really believe that to practice true compassion, we have to be able
mhm,
to, there's like a certain level of not only forgiveness, but also acceptance, right?
yep,
Acceptance for what the situation is, and then being able to forgive and realize this person's human too. And then same to ourselves, right? If you're still holding on to something, whether it's something that you're angry at with someone else for, or
mhm,
towards yourself and you haven't forgiven yourself yet, then I'm not sure you're really getting deep into the
right,
compassion, because there's that like,
yep. And there's layers to it, man. Like I still went through phases after my divorce, having to do it over again. And the intention's different then at that point too. Like my intention back then was to get through a healthy divorce process. And then after that, it was way deeper than that because I was still, in a sense, holding on to the past and not allowing my present and my future to be able to become what it is today. Again, a big part of that has to be loving compassion. It's definitely something like I've had to give to many people in my life of like you said, that you can't get to the core root of unconditional love when unforgiveness and resentment and all of that and they're triggering words, right? And like becoming your own best friend, my book talks about like not every single emotion, but a lot of the really, really important, big, heavy ones. And it talks about why they're important. And like I always say, like one of my favorite tricks when it comes to these really heavy emotions is taking it out for tea or taking it out on a walk or coffee or whatever it is that you like, right? And like, what do you do when you take a friend out to coffee? You talk to them, right? Like that's the purpose and the intention of it. And so I love to do that when I'm feeling some sort of way. Um, I love to just take it out for coffee or tea or go sit by a river and just talk to it and be like, why are you here? Like, what kind of lessons are you trying to teach me? And like, we don't do that so much with the bigger, more impactful, happier emotions. Cause in that moment, like we're not looking for an answer of like, why am I feeling this way? Even though you still could, but like we get lost in the, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be sad anymore. I don't want to be all these things. But that is a way to kind of like just push it down rather than dealing with like why is it emerging, and when you allow it to emerge and you allow yourself to ask those deeper questions, it goes away a lot faster. To be honest, like it doesn't stick around, doesn't manifest in other areas of your life if you just deal with it. So
exactly, like what we resist persists, right? So if we're like, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to feel
yep,
this, we feel it even more, we repress
yep,
it, it's still there, and then
hmm,
it's going to pop up when we're not expecting it.
hmm,
And it's just like a snowball effect. But it's
yeah, even like Dr. Kristen Neff, I know other people have said it too, but she talks about in her self-compassion book about pain times resistance equals suffering. So like we're all like pain is inevitable. Like we're going to experience that in different forms of our life. But it's when we have the resistance to the impact of the pain, or physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, whatever it is, right? It's our resistance to allowing that to emerge and to teach us something, or to change our life in whatever way. That's where the suffering is created, right? But instead of, again, like, you can have pain times self-compassion equals like something completely different than suffering, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know the Dalai Lama said, if you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want others
Yep.
to be happy, practice compassion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, I love that.
So what would you say, for someone who's maybe struggling to practice compassion, who they have that resistance to it, and maybe it's not coming naturally to them, or there's a blockage, like what really helps to kind of get deeper into the heart and get past those walls that can kind of block us from, because I think there's like a sense of vulnerability to it, right? So that's what I think a lot of times will keep us from going there, because it might be painful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, it's bringing the Dalai Lama back into it. Just do it more. Really, like, it's really
Right.
just doing it more. But there is kind of more like a warning symbol with it, because there's something called backdraft when it comes to
Okay.
experiences. Like, if we're really, we've experienced any sort of amount of trauma and abuse, anything that, like, where self-compassion feels so absolutely foreign, by practicing it, and in the beginning, like, there is more of this caution of, so backdraft comes from firefighters, and like that energy of when you open a door and the oxygen floods in, fire like emerges and there's like an explosion, right? And it so can feel super overwhelming to a lot of individuals, where this is the complete opposite of what's familiar to their nervous system, because we can. And that's where, like, our experience in life, and that the subconscious and our belief systems and what we've been exposed to become such a part of our identity. The inner critic can be so loud that as soon as we start to quiet it down, it's going to get louder, and it's going to become painful. It's going to bring all of these things up. And that's where the determination for more self-compassion, more practice with it, more self-care, more self-love. And self-care comes in such a different wide variety of things, right? Like, it really depends on the person and their situation. But like, I'm a big believer again with social work. I didn't end up going down the traditional path of social work as becoming a therapist by any means, but I'm a big believer it's still in that. There's still so many avenues of healing, and traditional and non-traditional forms of healing, that self-compassion, that last part of kindness. What do I need in this moment? It could be a Reiki session. It could be a bath. It could be a long talk with a friend. It could be going to your therapist or a counselor, or a meditation circle, or traveling somewhere new, whatever it is, right? Like, self-care is so vast. Like, it really depends on the situation and the individual and what they need.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up about the backdraft, because, trauma is so like widespread in our society. So I know that that can happen for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us. And if you weren't expecting that, and you're going deep into this work, and then it's like, oh no, it's getting worse, it's getting
Mm-hmm.
harder. And here I am, trying to move through this. That's a lot. And so for me, what comes up is having support too,
Yep.
not having to do it
Yep.
alone, but to be able to share with somebody, whether that be a therapist or a friend or whoever can be
Yep.
that person for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's having, like, it's really seeking out that level of support and accountability, and knowing, like, what's good for you. And it's really, and healthy is very uncommon for so many of us. Like, I remember getting out of like core addictions that I used to have, and like getting into healthier and healthier situations and choices and relationships. That was a threat to me for a while. It was like healthy was a threat. And so it's so interesting how the mind works, is that when we start exposing ourselves to actually what's good and what's healthy, it will start to tell us, oh, no, 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 backtrack, like, go back to what's familiar, even if it's unhealthy. And that's why people who are in, domestic violence situations have a hard time getting out, is because of the familiar. Also, other barriers and granted, there's a lot that's with that, but we can get so accustomed to our environment and our situation that it's scarier on the other side, even if it's healthier and it's safer. Like, oh, like I have no idea what that looks like or is even supposed to feel like. We get so used to unhealthy by whatever level of unhealthy it is that it feels safer and it feels better in some cases to be there rather than taking the efforts and continuously practicing and putting yourself in healthier situations. But when you're on the other side and that the nervous system adjusts to that, you are then able to identify what's toxic and what's unhealthy and what's wrong for you, right? And it's you're able then to shift into no more of that. Like that's just not I'm not accepting that in my life anymore because you know what's it's like the mind has to be on like a repeat, right? Like the reasons why we get stuck in a habit and things is because it's been on repeat for so long. And that's where the inner critic comes into play, right? We've been hearing it for X amount of years of our life. That's familiar. That is what I understand and know is to be true until we start questioning and saying, oh, am I really a bad person? Or am I really all of these things? Or is money, love, whatever it is, really scary or dangerous or bad for me? No, it's not. Like it's just looking into the limiting beliefs or the patterns and the chains and the illusions of change that yeah that keep you where you are, but you have to let go of the illusion a lot of the time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I feel like the inner critic and other like subpersonalities, that's the term they use in
Mhm.
psychosynthesis,
Mhm.
they're like these survival strategies that we develop.
Mhm.
So even the inner critic, it was at one point, it was trying to protect us and keep us
Yep.
safe, right?
Yep.
And so remembering that when these parts of ourselves come up, like, oh, this is a survival strategy,
Mhm.
whether it's my inner critic or it's some unhealthy pattern I've gotten into, but this originated as a way to keep me safe, even if it wasn't healthy, but maybe it's not serving me anymore.
Yep.
And so now I can shift that. And
Mhm.
also like befriending that inner critic, like not coming at it from a place of resistance, like, oh, why am I having these thoughts again? And like,
Exactly.
but like, oh, I can have love for even this part of myself.
Yes. And that's again like taking your emotions out to tea. That's a great point because that's the exact same thing you're doing with that. It's like you're becoming friends with it. Instead of making it the evil part of you or the bad part of you or the whatever part of you, we're able then to say, okay, this is a part of me. And because I love myself unconditionally, that means I can love this part of me that's showing up unconditionally. And the
Mhm.
same thing with your inner critic. And you can, like, it can still be your friend because it's more than likely going to have some valid points to some degree. Like, a critic
Yeah,
could even say, like, oh, no, that person's bad for you, right? Like, that person or that situation, like, don't do that. Like, it's correcting you in a sense of, like, no, that's not actually where you want to be anymore, right? It can have a different role in your life.
absolutely. It kind of takes it back to that self-kindness
Mhm.
point that so the question that they always ask at the end of the psychosynthesis work when we're working with these different parts is, what does this part of me need most to feel whole? And will I
Mhm.
give that part, or will I
Mhm.
give it what it needs?
Yep.
So it's like we can give ourselves that kindness, like, what does this part of me need?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's compassion in a way too. Yeah.
Very much so. I love that. Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Janie. I love the topic. I mean, there's so much potential for healing and growth when we bring compassion into our lives. And I feel like when we give it to ourselves, it's like this ripple effect,
Mhm.
all those around us and that we come into contact with.
Absolutely. It is so true. It has such an energy to it. And people can feel like when someone's truly self-compassionate or very compassionate to other people, like it's noticeable. You can feel it when you're walking by someone or, even hugging someone. You know when someone's really, really that energy.
Yeah. It's like you can
Mhm.
feel it in your heart. It's beyond
Mhm.
the mind, right? You're connecting with
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
heart's electromagnetic field. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Mhm.
Well, is there anything you would like to close with and share? You want to tell our viewers a little bit about you, like any work that you are doing right now, offerings, where they can find you if they want to connect with you, learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find me on mamametta.com. So that's MAMAMETTA.com. And you'll find all the different things, ways that I work with my clients. But as I am also an author, and I love to help other individuals become authors, because that was becoming an author was on my bucket list ever since I was like old enough to start writing. And I finally was able to achieve that. And so it's definitely, I know I'm not the only one. So I have a whole program in place for the writing and the publishing aspect, and it's a build your own package. So whatever you need, if you have the book already written, I can help you get it published. As well as hypnotherapy is a wonderful resource when it comes to the healing of the subconscious mind. So if you're really struggling with an inner critic, that it even could be something to go into in hypnosis session of like, where does this come from? And finding the root of something can be easy when you're really practiced with your own self. But if it's a challenge to really go deeper and deeper and deeper within yourself, if you haven't practiced a lot of meditation yet, or those means, like having that extra resource allows for the real root cause coming up to the surface. And as soon as that's recognized, a lot of healing, a big transformation, everything has a ripple effect. And so that root being pulled out, right? We always say, like, if you're talking to a gardener, you can't just trim the top, right? You have to seriously get every single piece of the roots of a weed out in order to allow the blossoming of your garden. So hypnotherapy, great resource. And again, if you want to become an author, I'm here to help. So thank you again so much for allowing me to be part of this. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you for being here, and thank you to whoever is watching. I am so grateful to be doing this and having these conversations. So from my heart to yours, thank you so much. Until next time, bye.
Bye.